And the development of Nigeria's financial markets could be the driver to diversify the economy and achieve long-term growth. Businesses come to financial markets to raise money by selling shares or borrowing through bonds. The role, therefore, of well-functioning financial markets as a catalyst for economic revival cannot be overstated. And joining us to discuss Nigeria's financial markets from the World Economic Forum, Davos in Switzerland, is the Chief Executive Officer of the Nigeria Stock Exchange, Oscar Onyema. You're welcome, sir, to the program. It's good to have you with us. What are your takeaways from the World Economic Forum conference as it wraps up?
Well, the first thing is, from the World Economic Forum Global Risk Report, the lack of action on climate change is the number one global risk, and the top 5 have something to do with climate change. So the major takeaway really is that African countries and indeed the rest of the globe needs to take this seriously. We need to have a more concerted effort, a more deliberate effort that is unpacked and that takes into consideration the various stages of development of the various countries across the globe. From a capital market perspective, it means that we, from the Nigerian financial markets, need to sharpen our focus on climate change and increase the level of activity that we have in order to catalyze change in our economy. As you know, we're already active in this space. We've worked closely with the federal government and with some corporates to introduce green bonds. And there are investors that are tracking green, climate-friendly, social, blue, orange bonds to deploy their capital, not only to make money, but also to help in addressing some of the big questions of our times.
Very good. Now, looking at the Nigerian Stock Exchange, what is your vision, or if you like, the future direction here?
Our vision really is to continue to be a platform that allows us to efficiently channel resources towards the sectors of the economy that need these resources. So investors provide these resources, and companies, corporates, sovereign states, municipalities that need to deploy this capital come to our platform to raise this money, be it in debt form, be it in equity or other structures, to deploy into various parts of the economy to drive growth. So when you have, climate change as an area of interest, then it's incumbent upon us to work with industry players to create products that would actually facilitate a green economy.
Very good, Mr. Onyema. Now, what does Nigeria need to do to attract foreign direct investment, or FDI? It desperately needs to accelerate growth at this rate.
We've been engaging with investors across the world, and they tell us a few things. Certainty. They want to make sure that the environment in which they're coming into allows them to bring in their money, and at the end of their investment period to be able to take their monies out without stress. Ease of doing business. As you know, the country has done very well in moving from, I believe, number 169 to number 131 in the World Bank Ease of Doing Business report. There's still a lot more to be done, but we are one of the top 10 improving countries, and we must keep it up. Another thing that investors are looking for is profitability. People are not investing money for the sake of investing money. They're looking to create impact. They're looking to do that while making money. So we have to continue to have an attractive economy that drives profitability. And now we're also adding impact, social impact, climate impact, and all other dimensions of impact that can improve the state of the human being.
good. Now, some analysts have said the Nigerian Stock Exchange is just not good enough in terms of investor participation and depth, as it were. That is, looking at market capitalization as a percentage of Nigeria's GDP, turnover of equities, etc. So how do you respond to these observations?
The first thing to note is that where we are in our development stage as a country, we're classified as a frontier market. And that means that there's still a lot of opportunity to grow into an emerging market and then to grow into an advanced market. So the Nigerian Stock Exchange is very reflective of the current state of the country in terms of where we are from a developmental perspective. Another important thing to note is the level of financial literacy. You can't have financial literacy without having literacy to start with. So we must do a better job as a nation to drive improvements in literacy and in financial literacy. If you look at the banking industry, the number of individual accounts that people have is about 35 million. You can't even access the capital markets without an account. So I'm just trying to explain to you that our market, while not very reflective of the economy, is one of the most sophisticated on the continent. We've done a lot of things to improve the experience when you engage in the market, be it from an issuance perspective to a trading perspective, where we've introduced some of the best technology platforms across the globe. So we've put in a lot of improvements to give a market structure that is competitive with any other market around the world. What we now need to do is to crowd in more participation from a corporate perspective and from an investor perspective. The last point I want to make on this issue is the fact that if you look at the structure of our GDP, the largest proportions are in services, agriculture, and we hold our farms in very smallholder structures, which don't lend themselves well to lending. They don't lend themselves well to corporatizing and raising money in the capital markets. And so these are just some latent challenges that must be addressed before you can see a capital market that is reflecting 50, 60, 70, 80, 100% of GDP.
Now, how do you convince an investor watching now trying to decide on a stock exchange to float an issue but not sold on the NSE? Now, thinking of floating in, say, Saudi Arabia or Johannesburg instead. What do you make of that?
Well, it depends, first of all, on where they have their business. If you're a Nigerian entity that is looking to float, our experience indicates that they're either looking to float in London or New York or Nigeria. And so we've worked very hard to give a competitive platform that allows them to access capital, both domestically and internationally. People float for various reasons, and you must understand the reason. Is it investor diversification? Is it branding? Is it to pass wealth across generations? Is it to raise capital? Is it to have that badge of honor, that integrity that comes with being listed? So there are different reasons why companies list, and what we do generally is to understand if a listing on the Nigerian Stock Exchange is appropriate for them, and then we work with them to facilitate that listing. As you know, in doing a listing on the Nigerian Stock Exchange, it's not just the exchange that is involved. You have various intermediaries that are involved and regulators that are involved. So at the end of the day, companies will make the decision that best suits their business objectives, and we're here to work with them to make it happen. And that is why we've been able to attract Africa-focused companies such as Lafarge Africa, Airtel Africa, to list on the Nigerian Stock Exchange. We've also been able to work with a number of multinationals that continue to stay listed on the Nigerian Stock Exchange as we appropriately service their needs to be on the exchange. And finally, you know that... Okay.
Very good. Mr. Oscar Onyema, of course, Nigerian Stock Exchange Chief Executive Officer. It's good to have you.